we'd like to offer the upholders of this status quo viewpoint yet another major challenge. In Western Australia, during the live telecast of Apollo 11 in 1969, many viewers in that region of Australia, including Una Ronald, were to have an extraordinary experience.
When this moon landing was in the offing, I for one decided to stay up to watch the live telecast, and I did, and we saw a lot of activity on the television screen from the control centre, a lot of anticipation, a lot of excitement.
But before we get to what happens next, we need to know how the TV coverage of Apollo 11 was supposed to have reached our screens.
Just shortly before Armstrong stepped on the moon, you can actually see the switch take place where it goes from this stark black and white to a little better. And they stayed with the television signal from Honeysuckle Creek. So when Armstrong stepped on the surface of the moon, it actually came through Australia, but at the time it was reported as being through Goldstone. The voice came through Goldstone, but the TV pictures came from Australia.
It appears that correct information was apparently withheld at the time as to what was supposed to be happening with Apollo 11's reception.
As I watched this person walking, a Coke bottle in the lower right quadrant of the screen, it seemed to be kicked over and rolled across. And for me, that was just astounding, and I exclaimed aloud at the time, "It's a fake, it's a setup, they're not on the moon at all, look at this, it's a Coke bottle." And they were going to broadcast the same film again in the morning, and I phoned several of my friends, "Did you watch?" And they hadn't, but they were going to watch in the morning. And I waited, of course, to say, "Well, did you see it?" But it didn't happen. I watched the second telecast. There was no Coke bottle, which led me to believe at the time that it must have been edited out. I was convinced it was fake, but why? Why it should be faked? Why such a setup? 2 or 3 others of my acquaintance did see it. Furthermore, there were letters written to the West Australian newspaper. They mentioned the Coke bottle. And I waited for it to brew up. I thought, my goodness, there's going to be a glorious ding-dong here going on about this Coke bottle. But suddenly there was nothing at all. And I presume that those who saw it denied their own senses, as people will do. Began to think, well, they couldn't have seen it, or perhaps it was there and that was okay. They'd thrown some rubbish out of the spacecraft or something like that. It could have been. People will invent all kinds of solutions to what is not explained.
What Una Ronald and her friends did not know was that Western Australia was a special case concerning the reception of the initial Apollo images. Contrary to the procedure for that continent set up by Honeysuckle Creek and Parkes, together with NASA and Australian TV, the Apollo 11 images were neither sent directly to Western Australia via satellite, nor was there a broadband link from Sydney in 1969. These images had to be sent over to Perth from Sydney by other means and then retransmitted locally. So for an engineer in the loop, aware of the hoaxed live TV coverage, there was motive for adding further additions to the scene. Moreover, here was an opportunity for someone in the know to manipulate the material before transmission across Western Australia. What does Una Ronald, who was in Western Australia at the time, think about these attempts at fakery?
When I saw the Coke bottle, for me, the whole moon landing from that point was a fake. It was a setup. And if it was a setup, it must have been filmed somewhere on Earth. And it would have been filmed, to my way of thinking, in America, at some lonely site, or alternatively in a huge indoor set, somewhere where they could be private, be secluded, be able to produce this quite passable picture of someone walking on the moon.